All right, well, I think that we are live now. For those of us joining us, we're going to give a couple minutes to let people roll in. As a reminder, you're going to be on mute right now, but you can leave questions in the question box on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar box. And you can also tweet at us at Austin Inno. That's at AUSTININNO. So you can hit us on Twitter. At the end of the panel conversation, we'll pick a few of the best questions and ask some of the panelists some of your questions. So feel free to add those once we get through the panel. So without further ado, hello everybody, and welcome to the 5th annual Inno on Fire celebration. I'm Brent Wistrom, the editor at Austin Inno. We're really bummed this year that we can't celebrate in person. Personally, 50 on Fire is probably my favorite event. I even have a fog machine set out for it. We usually do it up and have some great food and drinks and a lot of great networking. Obviously, this year's a little bit different, so we're really happy to have you with us virtually. It's great to have the sense of community, even though we're not in person. Our 2020 class of honorees range in size, industry, age, and stage. They're all having their moments in different ways. They're sizzling with new funding and rising revenue on the heels of entries and exits, and of course, pivots, particularly during this difficult period. COVID-19 has challenged these ventures, threatened their futures, and made growth that much harder. And for some, the pandemic has created great opportunities, and for others, it's issued a major test. And as we're celebrating today, many of these companies have passed that and exceeded. We hope that you'll enjoy the Inno on Fire celebration as an opportunity to look back on what these amazing people, organizations, and startups have accomplished over the last year. And we'll have a chance to look forward at some of the projects and endeavors that they're working on for the near future. Before we get rolling, for anybody unfamiliar with us and what we do, Inno is a part of growing network sites. We have 14 markets currently, and we're committed to covering and connecting local startups, founders, and other people in our communities. Austin Inno has been covering the local startup ecosystem since 2015, and we do that through daily news stories, the daily newsletter, quarterly events like this one, and other meetups. We also do something called Bites with the Beat, where we just have a short conversation with the founder, and it's kind of like watching a story live. So you can check all that out at austininno.com, and we encourage you to sign up for the Beat newsletter, which is our daily newsletter that helps you stay plugged in to everything that's impacting the local ecosystem. And you'll get local tech and startup news, analysis you won't find anywhere else, information on upcoming events in the community, job openings, and much more in a manner that I like to think is pretty conversational. I have fun writing it each day. So please check out austininno.com if you want to sign up for the Beat. In a few minutes, we're going to talk with some of the founders on our Inno on Fire list. But before we do that, I want to give you a little bit more information about what Inno on Fire is and why you're here. So in the past 5 years since we launched in Austin, we've been working to showcase the people, companies, and trends that are helping transform Austin and the Southwest ecosystem into a burgeoning innovation and startup hub. And Austin's doing pretty well at that. Today, we're really excited to introduce our 2020 Inno on Fire list, a celebration of the early stage businesses, enterprises, and innovators who are doing special work to set the ecosystem ablaze. In case you missed the announcement, we're going to put a link to the Inno on Fire post there in the chat box. So again, I encourage you guys to add questions to the chat box there and look for the links and handouts there if you'd like to learn more about some of these companies. So how did this work? Months ago, we asked our audience to submit nominations, and from that list of nominations, we pulled together the Inno on Fire list. This afternoon, we're going to talk with several founders who've made an impact in the last year and hear their advice to others. And we're also going to unveil the 2020 Blazer winners at the end of the event. If you haven't done this before, I'd like to explain what the Blazers are. For those of you that have done this in years past, you recognize the Blazer jackets. This year, of course, is a little different, but the Inno Blazer distinction is the same. So the Blazer is a designation we give to the top companies or people trailblazing new paths in their category or industry. So basically the hottest in their category. If you look at the list there, there's 10 different categories of startups that we've broken out. So from this list of 50, we've had a panel of esteemed judges who have looked through this and voted on the startups to choose the Blazer winners. Our judges this year included Oksana Melsheva from Sputnik ATX, Morgan Flager at Silverton Partners, Mitch Jacobson at Austin Technology Incubator, and Cotter Cunningham, an angel investor and founder at Retail Me Not, who also writes a weekly column in the Beat newsletter. Lastly, I'd like to thank our event sponsor, Amica. With more than a century of business know-how to their name, Amica is the oldest mutual insurer of automobiles in the country. They also offer home, marine, personal umbrella liability, and life insurance products. Their employees are the key to providing exceptional service to their loyal policyholders. Most importantly, they support local innovators like yourselves, so please check them out. Okay, moving on to the next phase here. We've got some amazing entrepreneurs and innovators joining us today for a panel conversation, so we're going to kick off our 2020 Inno on Fire panel. So we'll bring them on the camera here shortly to join us in the conversation. We have Jessica Gaffney, who's the CEO and Executive Director at Beam, which was formerly Women at Austin, Clark Nowlin, the founder of Golden Ratio, and Melvin Hines, CEO of Upswing. How's everybody doing today? Hello, Clark. Hello, Jessica. Hi, Melvin.
Hi there. Great.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. It's obviously been a tough year in a lot of ways, but each of you's had significant success despite the odds. We've shared some of the highlights about what your companies and organizations have done in that Inno on Fire post, but I'm hoping you can tell me quickly and tell the audience a little bit about what your company does and a few of those big milestones that you've had this year. And let's start with Jessica.
Hi there. Thanks again for having me. So I'm Jess Gaffney, and as Brent said, I'm the CEO and Executive Director for Beam, formerly known as Women at Austin. So we are actually a nonprofit organization, and we support women founders in Austin and beyond. I would say for this year, some of our biggest milestones, we became our own 501c3 nonprofit. So we live under the Nowlin umbrella, and Nowlin is a great supporter of our organization and is helping us to grow and scale our impact. And we originally were kind of living under the Nowlin 501c3, and now we became our own 501c3 this year, which meant we also launched our first board of directors. And then I would also say our biggest news was launching our biggest program yet, which is our angel network. And that connects angel investors with early stage women founded companies in Texas. And we've just received a lot of momentum and excitement around it, which I'm just thrilled about, especially during a challenging year. And now we have actually we have over $1.2 million in investment commitments for women founders to be invested in the coming year.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, you guys have kept the news flowing for sure. It's been really great to see you guys keep churning and keep building, helping so many other startups.
Certainly. We're really grateful for it. So thank you. Thanks for the support.
Yeah. Melvin, how about you? What's Upswing do?
So Upswing works with colleges and universities around the country to help improve the persistence rates and ultimately graduation rates of their online and non-traditional students. Typically, non-traditional students who we typically define as students that are older than 25, those who are student parents, those who are working while in school. These students tend to not necessarily get the same type of access to critical campus communities that their on-campus peers do. So they can't, for example, talk to a professor after class, or speak to an advisor, or talk to career services. And as a result, the lack of access to those resources are a big part of the reason why they tend to drop out at twice the rate of their on-campus peers. So everything that we do here at Upswing is about creating a conduit that makes it so that they can have the exact same opportunities and likelihood to graduate as everyone else does. To date, we've been able to prevent almost 50,000 students from dropping out, and that number actually increases by over 1,000 new students every single month. So we currently work with around 70 colleges around the country, and obviously have a pretty strong presence here in Texas, being based here in Texas. And yeah, just continuing to try and find ways to support more and more non-traditional students.
Yeah, you guys have set some pretty ambitious goals, if I recall correctly, in terms of the number of students you want to help.
Yeah. So our aim was to actually hit the 50,000 student prevented goal by 2020, and of course it's now the end of 2020, so we're right there on that cusp. The latest numbers are getting ready to come in for this past semester, and knock on wood, hopefully that'll be what we'll achieve. We're actually now looking at where we want to go to next, and our focus there is to really try and think about how we can support specific cohorts of students. And so our next round of, say, support that we want to provide for students is how many, say, online students can we help? How many student parents can we help? How many students in community colleges or HBCUs can we support? If we can really come up with those types of specifics, then we can really help to fulfill our mission even further.
Excellent. Thanks, Melvin. Let's kick it to Clark to learn some more about Golden Ratio.
That's amazing, you all. Great work. My name is Clark Nowlin. I'm the founder of Golden Ratio, and we invented a new type of coffee called gold coffee. And put simply, we turn water into gold. So here's what it looks like, so you all can see it. And we launched our business on June the 30th, so like right in the middle of the year. And the pandemic, really, I feel like early-ish March is when it got real, at least here in Texas. And that was right as we started our fundraising, as well as brought the team on board to launch the business, and bought our first round of inventory to launch with. And so yeah, that definitely caused some challenges. I think we might get into that a little later. Yeah, since we've launched, it's been a fun ride. We've already have customers in all 50 states, doing healthy 6 figures in sales. Nordstrom's picked us up and closed first tranche on our seed round. Got some great local angel investors who hopped in on that. Thank you, Gary Keller, Brett Hurt, and Upswing, whoever's out there. Anyways, yeah, it's been a really fun ride. So we're on a mission to help people start the day the golden way. And Women's Health Magazine just named this the best fall flavor of 2020. So if you're on this, check out our pumpkin spice gold coffee. It actually has real pumpkin in it, and most flavored coffees with a pumpkin don't. And so that didn't really make sense to us, so we put real pumpkin in it, and here we are.
Nice. It's the season for it, right? It's cool weather. Well, obviously you guys have all had a big year, but it's also been a really tough year for just about everybody in many different ways. So my question is, what has been your secret to thriving during a difficult time? And let's start with Clark.
Yeah, so fortunately for us, being in the coffee business, it's not something that people have stopped drinking during the pandemic. It's actually, I think people actually drink a little bit more coffee. And given that our business model now, because of the pandemic, is exclusively a direct consumer business model, which means we sell products on our website and we deliver it straight to your door. People don't need to go to the grocery store to buy it. Since we're a new thing in coffee, and people have been bored, they're kind of more willing to adopt and try new things. And given they don't have to risk going to the grocery store or anything else to get it, that has definitely been something that hasn't suffocated opportunity from us. We've actually been able to find it and seize it. And then the other thing is just don't give up. Persistence overcomes resistance. And starting to fundraise during the pandemic when the Dow Jones had its worst week in a decade was something that I think most of the angel investors who kind of paused investing, that we had soft commitments for, that we had to figure out how we move forward to keep our timelines without maybe collecting all the checks we thought we were going to collect. I think when you don't give up, that really shows a lot. And I've never met an investor who wants to back an entrepreneur who would give up or take no for an answer. So I think just not giving up is big key to it.
Excellent. Melvin, what's been your secret to thriving during this tough time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that a couple things. First, we aim to really support and provide for additional supports of non-traditional students, part of whom we include as online students. within the college and university space. So as you know, suddenly in March, every student became an online student, which meant that the types of services that we were supporting became that much more critical for a lot of the college partners that we had. So from that perspective, we were able to help them move online a lot more quickly than they would have been able to otherwise. I remember that week when all the schools were deciding to shut down, our phones, at least from our current partners, were ringing off the hook. And then of course, even with new partners, we're trying to help them to navigate those waters as well. But we also had to make a lot of, I think, adjustments and changes to make sure that we were providing the right support that we could, not just externally, but also internally as well. Of course, we were all moving remotely, as I'm sure everyone else here has had to do as well. And along with that, had to make sure that there were ways that we were keeping up morale and making sure that our team was motivated. And so for me, that was the biggest, I think, single biggest thing that I could do for our organization, was find a way to keep that piece moving forward. We set up different committees and teams to kind of be in charge of different types of virtual, events to take place, and check-ins that we would do every month or so, where people could just get real about how they're feeling currently. Maybe there's someone who's sick in their family, maybe there's someone who's lost their job, and that we could actually sit around and kind of talk about that and make sure that people were doing okay. So I think there were definitely a lot that we had to do internally to just make sure that our team was being resilient throughout this process as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you bring up that it's kind of like, both for the students, you're helping make sure people don't fall through the cracks. And I hear that from parents, more grade school than college, I guess, for myself, but such an opportunity to get lost now that we're not seeing each other in person. And just to the same, to your company on the internal side, being able to keep tabs with people and stay in touch in a meaningful way is tricky.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, we saw, it was, I think, one of the biggest surprises that came when everything went remote was how many students, schools that we worked with just expected to have all the resources available. A lot of them didn't have internet. A good portion of them didn't have laptops. And because of the way our product works, we're in a lot of cases the first line of defense for students. And so we were actually informing colleges in a lot of cases who had no idea that whole swaths of their schools weren't able to connect in with their instructors, weren't able to complete tests because they just didn't have the resources. And so as a result, we were fortunate to be able to help support some of those colleges in creating things like laptop loan programs, emergency grants to pay for internet access and things of that nature, and to just kind of check in on students and see how they're doing emotionally in a new isolated environment. All those things were just really important in those first few weeks of COVID. And of course, now we're trying to, get better at solidifying those to make sure that we can continue to help support them over the course of the next 6 months to a year, hopefully not much longer than that.
Yeah, we're all excited for this to be over, right? Yeah. Jessica, what's been your secret and Beam's secret to thriving during this tough time?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for us, it was the opportunity to focus on where we could have the most impact, and really focusing on what opportunities are out there for us to do so. So for example, when COVID first hit in March, we immediately started working on and then launched a virtual series for women founders that were really struggling, that helped them to get information about PPP or how to sell during this really hard time, things like that, but then also to connect with each other. So for us, it was that opportunity to be able to actually help and support them in that kind of way was really energizing for our team. And also, of course, hopefully helpful for founders that were struggling. And then I would say another example of that is, we started working on the Angel Network before COVID. And so, we sort of were like, oh, geez, what's going to happen now? But what we actually found when really talking to people is that giving them an opportunity to not only continue to invest if they had the capacity to do so, but to also do good at the same time, really was a great opportunity for both investors and founders who, maybe during this pandemic time started thinking a little bit more about their values and what was important to them. And, especially as, racial justice movement became, very much in the headlines, and the numbers are real when it comes to women founders getting funding or lack of getting funding. And if you are a woman of color, it's almost statistically impossible to fundraise. So I think that we were able to give them that opportunity, and there was a lot of, I think, there was just a true opportunity to not only help our founders and have that impact, but also give that opportunity to investors as well.
You mentioned some of those virtual meetups with founders. I'm curious if you can share what some of those conversations were about, or what they were like, both in the early days when things were super scary, and maybe now when people are finding a little bit of a rhythm in this weirdness.
Yeah, I mean, what was interesting is pretty early on, there definitely was a little bit of panic and a real desire for information. One of my favorite things about women founders is that and this is of course a generalization, but in general, what I see is that they're always interested in learning and growing. And so there was, that kind of became really, really important at the beginning, because it was like, okay, I need information about, PPP. I need information about, best strategies for selling, best strategies for pivoting. Those kind of things were really interested. There was a lot of interest for those. So what we did is we created these virtual groups where they were able to learn for the first 30 minutes, where we had an expert come in and talk to them about selling, pivoting, prioritizing, PPP stuff. And then the second 30 minutes were gave them an opportunity to connect with each other and really be honest, because a lot of them, especially if they're the breadwinner, it's hard to even talk to their partner about, their anxiety or struggle with, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? So being able to really have those honest conversations, we broke them into smaller groups. So there's even more intimacy to be able to be pretty honest. But what I've also been seeing, and what we pivoted again for, is that the appetite and, for virtual, events, and, it just became exhausting for people. So the interest in, we had about 86 founders sign up within 48 hours for that first session. And then what we really saw it wane. And there's just so much out there. People are exhausted. They're, we call them Zoombies, from, hours and hours of Zoom calls. So we really had to kind of change our direction, and we weren't doing as many consistent events like that.
Excellent. We'll start the next question with Melvin. We've talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious how you've adapted your product during the pandemic.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The first was actually pretty close to what Jessica was mentioning. We did actually start off with doing more webinars to provide information and insight. I think that there was a dearth of understanding for how to engage students in a remote environment for schools that had not really considered, doing things remotely. And so, we focused very highly on engaging students in that remote environment. So we started putting out different types of webinars and things like that to help schools understand these are the metrics that you should pay attention to. These are the risk factors that come with being a remote student, and that you should focus on if you start to see any of these early indicators. We also ended up for many of our colleges offering a lot of the tools that we knew were going to be really needed for free over the course of the next 3 months, thinking that that was going to be how long all this would last. And so that was a big part of what we wanted to do to really just kind of be there and support them. they had, been there to support us over the course of the last few months. We knew that so many of them were needing the support, and so if they didn't have certain modules that we knew would be really important for them, we made sure that that was available. But then the third thing that we really started to kind of focus on over the course of the summer was really, I think, pivoting how they looked at us, so that rather than us just looking as a software vendor to them, instead making it a lot more of becoming a consultative experience for them. So we actually conducted a lot of surveys to the students on behalf of the school to get them to understand things like the fact that a laptop loan program was needed, or to find out that a lot of them were struggling with the mental health concerns associated with isolation, associated with many of the unrest that was happening this past summer. And that actually led us to partnering with an organization to create mental health resources that we launched this fall, actually, for all of our students that are attend the schools. It's all included in the platform as well. So those were just some of the things that we wanted to make available to adapt to what was currently happening, and just continuing to make sure that we're being relevant to those non-traditional students. Even so far as changing up our product roadmap in a lot of ways. A lot of students today are trying to figure out how they're going to continue to pay for college, for example. So how are things that we can do to help support paying for those expenses, whether it's through emergency aid funding, whether it's through helping out with financial aid applications, those sorts of things. So we've started to do a lot of changes, and we're continuing to think about how we can continue to conduct those changes so that we're always sort of relevant to the students and the needs that they have.
How do you think, like with the mental health aspect that you guys launched, I'm curious, do you see that being a permanent thing, or do you think that there will be a time, hopefully next year, or maybe even a little further down the range, where that goes away? I'm kind of curious how much, this is kind of becomes permanent from the product standpoint.
Yeah, so we had always taken a look at where we wanted to go, and we started off really being focused on academics for students, helping out with things like tutoring and academic coaching, mentoring for people who had been in some of those careers. And what we had taken a look at specifically as we launched our virtual assistant a few years ago called Anna, that could allow students to ask anything they wanted. We started to notice that there was a significant percentage of students that were asking for help and support within the mental health arena, significant percentage that were asking for help and support in the financial aid arena, for example, career services. These were all things that either their schools weren't offering, or they were and they just didn't know how to get in contact with them. So we always knew that those were things that we wanted to help provide support with. But in the last 6 months, of all those different things that non-traditional students needed help and support with, this one was by far the number one. And so that's why we knew that we had to put that first and foremost, to make sure that it's something that we could get out the door as quickly as possible. And so that's kind of how we thought about sort of changing that. So that's most certainly going to be a permanent part of our offering moving forward.
Cool, thanks. Clark, how about you? Obviously, Golden Ratio is kind of born during the pandemic. I'm curious, how you've had to adapt, maybe what you were planning compared to what you actually had to do.
Yeah, it definitely, just like everybody else in business, the plan you started with January of 2020 is not the business plan you've probably since executed now at the end of the year. We had to rip that plan up and come up with a new one. And so yeah, we're no different than others in that way. And the biggest difference for us is that I was planning to do a lot, kind of the natural starting place with coffee. You go through a lot of cafes and get our coffee there, as well as we had some corporate relationships. We got yeses from Bumble, from Facebook, from Outdoor Voices, to start getting some gold brew on kegs on tap there. And so that was really exciting. And for building the brand, I was really excited to have these companies adopting us. One, they have money and they could pay us. And then two, the people who work there, I felt like were really good overlaps between our core demographic of who we're trying to serve. And so was really excited to start with that. And then when the pandemic hit, none of these companies have been in their office since then. So all those keg deals aren't a thing. Additionally, the coffee shop plan, it still doesn't make as much sense. It's starting to make a little more sense as they've figured out, how to stay alive, and they've got customers coming through, but the traffic generally is a lot lower in those stores. And so fortunately we'd already put the supply chain together to launch these products, which is the ones you find on our website and ones for sale at Nordstrom's. They basically come in these little tea bags. And so we set that manufacturing up already, and we plan to have a website in which you could buy products. But I was really going to spend the first 2-ish years building kind of from the ground up. And instead, in the pandemic hit, and those options weren't that attractive, we needed to execute only a direct consumer model, which it was good in a way that it really forced me to get some clarity on what we wanted to build and what the best steps were. And for me, it was around March. I took a weekend to really think and research to figure out how do I lead our company through this pandemic with these people I just turned payroll on for, and now this pandemic is hitting, and what's going to happen. And ultimately, I concluded that this is actually the business we wanted to build anyways. Like, the quality of revenue with a direct consumer business is much higher than the quality of revenue through more of a B2B or cafe model. And so basically we tripled the amount of money we're seeking to raise at the same time, because to build a big enough user base through online acquisition just costs more than walking into coffee shops and getting some local accounts set up. And so what's ironic about that is that it became a lot harder to raise money during the pandemic, especially at least when the Dow Jones had its really big drop. And so so we basically pivoted to direct consumer only. And it's cool because now we've got clarity. I got some boxes of products that I'm studying as Atlas Coffee Club. They're a local company. Michael, their founder and CEO, is one of our advisors, great guy. But there's also a Verb Energy Co. It's another company. They're out of New York, and they sell coffee bars. These are coffee companies that have built 8-figure subscription businesses, D2C only. And now I have clarity that we're going to do the exact same thing. And so it's really helped guide us in that way. And that I used to have a pro forma that was really complicated, and it had, okay, here's what our B2B keg model looks like, here's what our cafe model looks like, here's what our website looks like, here's if we go into retail, here's what that looks like. And now our pro forma is very simple. It has 4 lines on it. It's like, okay, here's our subscription revenue, here's our one-time revenue, cost of acquisition, and our COGS on that, and then here's kind of monthly cash flow because of those things, which has actually made it a lot easier to lead. And it's also surprisingly enough, investors, and they look at that, they're like, okay, great, this is a really simple to understand. And so that the simplicity of only having one channel has actually been kind of a gift, but it is it's just a different game, and it's a little more expensive to build, but we're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I sure miss coffee shops big time, but it's pretty cool that we can explore quite a bit without having to go in.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica, how has Beam adapted its offerings during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we were really prioritizing in-person events for a while, and our educational series were all in person. So we quickly changed everything to virtual. And what's been actually great about it is, one, we've expanded beyond Austin. And sometimes beyond Texas, really, really quickly. That was always a plan, but it enabled us to do it right away. And then the other thing was that, with our events, we were able to really cater them and create a cadence for them that I think founders really appreciated and liked more so than we were doing it in person. So, for example, we were doing our office hours with purpose events. They were 2-hour, events that you would attend in person and meet with 3 different mentors. And what we were able to do is bring them online, which allows scheduling. It's much easier. And now we've added it as a benefit, one-on-one free mentoring for our member collective, which is essentially our membership for women founders that are interested in getting involved with our organization, and they can get free one-on-one mentoring. And it doesn't mean that our mentor can be anywhere and our mentee can be anywhere, and all they have to do is just find a time that works for them virtually. So it's allowed us to really have bigger impact in a sense as well. Of course, we still miss the in-person magic. I mean, you can't replace that. Everyone knows it. But if you're having a 30-minute mentor session, can certainly make it work now online. So, yeah.
That's got to be nice too to have that. You're not tied to the location for the mentors, so you can bring
And
them
it's
along.
been, yeah, and it's been working fantastically for our angel network too, because you know, a lot of our investors travel or, you know, aren't available, and this allows them really to be a lot more present. And we launched it with it being virtual. So, you know, we kind of got lucky in that way, in that it wasn't a big pivot or a change from previous behaviors. So that's how now we'll always be, and we'll be able to expand quicker as a result.
Excellent. That's speaking of events, kind of a nice segue to the next question is how you guys are interacting with your team and your investors and your customers. I'm curious if you're using a particular platform like Zoom or GoToWebinar or whatever, and how that's going for you all. And we can start with Jessica since.
Yeah, I mean, we have, especially at the beginning of COVID, that was one of our biggest challenges, is platforms and tools. What should we use? What's best? You know, we tried out a bunch of different things. We really have landed on Zoom for most of our events and larger meetings that we have with our advisory council or our board. It's really easy to do breakout rooms and smaller discussions and pair people up and then come back together. So that's been working really well. For our mentor sessions, what we learned pretty quickly after several months of trying is that the best thing to do is to allow for the mentors to actually dictate what platform or tool would be best for them. Because we tried to use one and then it wouldn't work for several people, or people just didn't know how to use it, or it didn't work with, you know, their companies had a firewall or whatever it is. So we also figured out pretty quickly that using one doesn't work for all. Yeah, that's been working pretty well for us.
I'm trying to imagine a mentor who uses House Party for their meetings.
Well, it's also funny because I'm like, every once in a while someone will call my phone and I'm like, who is that and why are they calling and what do they want from me? You know, it's like so unbelievable now to just like pick up the phone and have a conversation. And so a couple of the mentors have been like, can I just call the person? And I'm like, yes, of course you can. But it's funny what we're used to now. So good old phone calls too.
Yeah. Melvin, how about you? How's it kind of changed how you interact with the team and investors and clients?
Yeah, so you know, I'm one of, I think, those old school people that now is preferring the phone call. You know, it's after staring, I think, you know, at Zoom and everything else for so long, I actually just appreciate a good old fashioned phone call. Go outside, take a walk, you know, get a few steps in. But you know, as a team, we had already kind of flirted with this perk of, you know, 1 day a week just letting everyone work from home. And, you know, maybe that would be a way of creating flexibility for people, you know, who might have families or things like other responsibilities. We just wanted to kind of try it out. So we had been doing that for maybe, I don't know, maybe about 6 months prior to the pandemic, which set us up pretty well once everything got started, because we had to learn all these initial obstacles of things like communication barriers, how to over communicate, how to, you know, accommodate for, you know, just different people in different times and that sort of stuff. How to make sure that the meeting isn't the end of the conversation, all that sort of stuff. So then once the pandemic hit and we were all of a sudden, you know, away for 5 days a week, and we were able to kind of gravitate towards that. We've, as an organization, you know, heavily used Slack in terms of the communication tool of choice. And then in terms of our virtual meetings, we gravitated towards Google Meet, just because, you know, we use Google for everything else, and and they just kept kind of forcing it until you're just like, okay, fine, we'll just use you. And so that's basically been what we've been doing. But yeah, you know, if I end up having to meet with an investor or something like that, I pretty much just call them.
Yeah, similar to Melvin, walks of stayed up, something I do regularly now. It's something I did before the pandemic, but I'm typically on the trail at least once a day, probably 3 days a week, twice a day. Just kind of it's when I catch up with folks or take the random meeting or pick your brain stuff. I love getting out, getting steps in, getting outside. Let's just kind of take a break from all the screens. So that stayed constant. I'll be there tomorrow at 7 a.m. and it's gonna be really freaking cold. We're gonna go run, but yeah. So that is, you know, some meetings. And then farther as investors are concerned, I've had a couple like backyard chats, like we'll stand like, you know, like 12 feet away from each other or whatever, and, you know, set up chairs. That's been fun because we actually get to hang in person some. A lot of Zoom, a lot of phone call. It kind of depends on the person. You know, when you're on the asking for money side of things, you're kind of flexible on, you know, what tool they want to use. But and then, you know, as far as team is concerned, our team's actually pretty spread out. Like our head of product lives in Seattle. She came from Starbucks Innovation Lab. And so like I've flown up there twice this year to do some product development stuff with her. We've got 2 people on our team right now in New York City. And so I've spent some time there, as well as, you know, we hop on Zooms pretty regularly. And then I've got some Austin team, which depending on the week and kind of how we feel about it, we might meet in person and kind of co-work together. And that's been really fun to kind of contrast the Zoom only work culture we've had, given that we launched in the pandemic. And then also as a CEO, some of the people we've hired fresh out of UT, love them so much. And I realized probably not a good idea to give them just like complete unrestricted, you know, executive access, because they're pinging me with questions 24/7. I'm like, oh, I kind of missed like the Zoom thing. You had to like, you know, book a meeting with me, not just like, you know, because I don't get my job done, like the whole party stops. So yeah, it's definitely like a hybrid of the two. Now, you know, if we do those things, I'll typically go twice a week, and the other days I'll, you know, be in here and doing Zoom meetings, just so I can kind of keep my focus. Yeah, and then, you know, probably once a week we'll end up on a Google Hang meeting, just because, you know, Google forces the issue, and then, you know, half the people show up on that meeting, not the Zoom meeting you emailed, because, you know, it's more simple. But yeah, a lot of Zoom. And then we also use Notion. It's kind of our project management tool, and we communicate in there. And haven't adopted Slack yet. I'm trying to hold off as long as possible for that, just because I feel like it can quickly become a distraction and kind of place to not work, appropriately named Slack. And so I'm trying to keep us away from Slack as long as possible, but I do realize it's probably inevitable. But so far so good.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah. We got 6 people, you know, on the team now daily, and so yeah, we can live without it now, I think. We'll see.
Cool. I see some good questions coming in from the viewers out there. Just a reminder, if you have a question for anybody on the panel, add it to that question box in the GoToWebinar control panel there. And we'll get to those. I've got just a couple more questions that we'll chat about here, and then we'll take some of those reader questions. So, you know, we've talked a lot about how COVID has changed the course of our businesses. Not the only really big important thing in our world. Equally important, the fight for racial justice continues. Tech has a diversity problem that continues. I'm curious how you guys have adjusted your approaches, and what are some of the ways that you see the Austin startup scene, and what opportunities the Austin startup scene has to improve. And we can start with Jessica.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important question. I think one of the things I'm really proud of is that when I joined when Austin/Beam now, back in May of last year, we went through kind of a mini strategic planning process. And one of the values that we aligned on very early on was intentional inclusivity. And I think we have really threaded that into everything we've done. Not just from a racial inclusivity aspect, but you know, making sure, you know, everyone feels included age-wise, LGBTQ community, you know, and even just like when it comes down to, there's kind of a hierarchy sometimes within women-founded companies, in the sense that, you know, some feel like they're just a lifestyle business, or they're very small, and others feel like they're scaling, and it's even like identifying who those are and making sure everyone feels included and has a seat at the table. So I'm really proud of that. I think also with our angel network, we always knew we were going to do this, but we intentionally spent a lot of time crafting a equity pledge around our angel network that, you know, it's on our website, and that we have made specific decisions for that to make sure that we're honoring that, and, you know, being as inclusive as possible. You know, one of the ways we're doing that is through our community partners, and going, you know, making sure we're partnering with other organizations that have access to communities that might not know about, you know, the opportunity to apply for funding. So I think while it's certainly on our minds more, it's always something that we have been really committed to. So yeah, I'm proud of that. I think that there was a couple other questions in there that you had. I don't know if I touched on everything.
It's just kind of, I guess, the two sides of our, you know, what your organization has done to adjust and to make a more inclusive environment, and then what the greater Austin startup ecosystem can do to make it more of an inclusive environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I talked a little bit about our organization, and then I think just, you know, as an entire ecosystem, I think it's really important to have, you know, have diversity in all aspects when it comes to obviously growing companies, hiring, when you're creating boards, you know, it's essential to have diversity of thought, because that breeds innovation and creativity. And I think that's something that everyone knows, but it's good to be reminded of. And, you know, you can do specific things, like when it comes to hiring. You can also, you know, what we have done also is try to have a specific goal, you know, around diversity when it comes to our board of directors, our advisory council. Companies can do the same. I've even seen also some folks that have been open to giving up their spots at the table in order to be replaced by someone, a person of color, a woman, whatever it is that, you know, ways that you're looking to diversify. So I think that kind of covers it for me.
Melvin, what are some of the ways that Upswing's adjusted, and some ways that Austin can improve as a larger ecosystem?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You know, for us, diversity has always been a really important part of what we do here at Upswing. You know, we've been proud of the fact that, for example, over half of all of our users are Black or brown. It's actually a big part of why I started Upswing in the first place. You know, I think that there is definitely an issue that takes place where when different voices are shut out, unfortunately, what ends up happening is it's not just the voices themselves, but it's what those voices represent. So, for example, you know, when you take a look at the fact that, as I was talking about earlier, non-traditional students drop out at twice the rate as their on-campus peers. Well, those non-traditional students are, by and large, Black or brown, right? They're much more likely to be student parents, right? Both of my parents were actually non-traditional students. My mom, like, I went to college with her from middle school all the way to high school after work, you know, where I was sitting on the steps while she was in class. And that experience that I have that's led me to want to start Upswing are the types of experiences that, in my opinion, get shut out when we don't find ways to make sure that diversity is around the table when you're talking about investors, when you're talking about board members, when you're talking about advisors. And it can't just be something that we decide to do, you know, in this season and then kind of forget about the next season. It has to be something that we're really committed to. Because I think that, you know, if we're not making that level of commitment, once again, we're shutting out, you know, things that could help support whole communities all around the country, right? And that in and of itself is not just the moral wrong, but it's financially, you know, not a good decision either. I think that if you take a look at, some of the stats that come out, we see time and time again that, a lot of these organizations tend to generate a pretty high ROI compared to the investments that are there, but it's really hard to get those investments in the first place. I think that where Austin can really help to provide support there is to, honestly, just kind of put their money where their mouth is. I think that in a lot of cases, people tend to say all the time that, minority and female founded organizations are over mentored and underfunded. And I think that that's a big thing that you see all the time, is that it's always kind of about how can we create, this type of diversity event that we're going to bring all these companies into that can showcase how great we are because we're bringing them there. But, they don't really have any funding to make sure that they can last the next year, right? And so as a result, you tend to see that really good ideas that end up falling by the wayside because they just couldn't, hold on long enough. I think that if Austin, really started to focus a lot more on trying to provide more of those investment vehicles and opportunities for more of those organizations, we would see some really awesome, unique products that could come out of this community, not just in the typical kind of, app space, but actually, within areas that might be a lot quieter than people are typically expecting, from some of those communities.
Excellent.
Such a good point. I'm regretting not saying that directly as well. Invest in women and people of color founders. Simply put.
Yeah. I know we're running out of time, so I'll be real quick, but I agree with both of you all, and actually you said something exactly, Melvin, that I was going to say. But I'm grateful that our company really kicked off right, as this is a big point of attention nationally, because it was, was more top of mind for me then as well, just given everything that was going on. And so, for us, it's just simple, half the team, female, male, 50-50 split on that, and then it's half minority and then white. And it's just, for me, what you said, Melvin, just put your money where your mouth is. And so I'm grateful that I got the opportunity to, while we were putting the foundation together, to hire that way, and to really make sure that was, a priority. And additionally, to the rest of Austin, just what you all said, put your money where your mouth is. It's the beauty of America and free enterprise, is that as the leaders of organizations, you get to make the call. And so if it's important to you, then make the call.
Yeah, it's about the action.
Yeah.
We're going to get to some reader questions here in just a second. I'm curious quickly what you guys have planned for your teams once the pandemic is through. Are you going to go back to a traditional office, maybe the one you had, or keep the at-home game going?
2 days a week. I got to keep my executive time, but it'll probably be a blend. It's definitely a good recruiting tool to say, hey, we just care about getting great work done, and if you can get great work done from anywhere, then so be it. Go do it. Go work from Cozumel for a week. Shoot, I might join you. So yeah, that's kind of the policy we have today, and I wouldn't be surprised if that ever changes.
Melvin?
Yeah, ours is going to be a hybrid as well, actually. We were, before the pandemic, very dogmatic about, everyone needing to be in one place all at the same time, just because we thought that culture would be, affected adversely if that weren't the case. I think what we've quickly learned is that we can still build a really strong culture in this virtual setting. People like the flexibility, but they do miss each other. So part of what we're actually looking at right now is coming out of the lease that we currently have, and instead finding a smaller space somewhere that people have the, kind of like what Clark was saying, have the opportunity to go to, whenever they want to, or set up meetings, but otherwise we would just be remote.
Right on. Jessica?
That's amazing how the whole state of work has changed. I spent 2 years working on a startup before this role that was about supporting women in the workforce. And I can't tell you how many meetings I had with employers that said, nope, we can't have any of them work from home. We really need everyone in the office. And now it has completely changed. It's amazing. But for us, so we work out of the Nowlin offices on the east side, and We don't have any plans to go in person right now, but once things sort of clear up, I think we'll definitely do a hybrid. I think that I miss the collaboration a lot, but I think I really like that people have the freedom and authority to sort of make the decision of where they can be the most productive.
Excellent. One more question from me, and then we'll get to some reader or some viewer questions here. Just want to tap into the personal side a little bit. Once we get through this, what are you most looking forward to doing after the pandemic? What's the thing that you're hoping to do? And I'm guessing there's going to be a lot of airplanes involved, but let me know. We can start with Clark.
Events, the more the merrier. I love big gatherings of people, and it's probably been more of a blessing than a curse just for me productivity wise to not have all the FOMO in this season while the company's launched. It's definitely required a lot more of me being at the desk than normal. But yeah, I can't wait for more events and just to give people hugs. I'm a hugger, but not in 2020. But one day when that's a thing again, I can't wait to give people big hugs.
Excellent. Melvin?
Well, we were actually, my fiance and I were supposed to get married in February, and yeah, gotten pushed back by a year. So, looking forward to, being able to celebrate and actually have a true wedding.
Yeah.
I hope we can sooner than later. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say similar to Clark, hugs are a big one for me. My family is all in New York, and so traveling and getting to give them big hugs is something I'm definitely looking forward to. And I also would love to eat at some of my favorite restaurants and have others serve me instead of cooking all the time.
Yeah, it's not quite the same when you've got all the plastic bags and fill up the garbage.
It's not.
Look at some of the viewer questions here. There's a couple shout outs to start out with. One is aimed at Melvin. That's an impressive number of students. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
How many students are helping out there? And then one for Clark, 6 figures in sales in 6 months. That's insane. What was so successful about the initial launch that caused so much growth in the following months?
Yeah, so we had our 5-month birthday 2 days ago. That was exciting. So did it in the first 3.5, I think. No, yeah, ish. And we have returning customers. That's definitely helped. 1 in 6 people come back to buy again. And so, from an ad perspective, we haven't really opened too much the floodgates just yet. But I mean, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on advertising to date. We're a direct consumer business. A lot of it's just kind of learning where we're going to really effectively convert and getting our ROAS numbers. These are kind of lingo terms for my industry and my business. But yeah, so we've definitely been spending. But additionally, wholesale deal, Nordstrom's that was good, and it was a big check as well as yeah, we have returning customers.
Excellent. This is one for everybody. It says, you are all working so hard towards diversity. Thank you. When do you see your efforts paying off, and what does that look like? I don't know who wants to jump in on that, but
I mean, I can say that for us, we really weren't sure who was going to apply for our first round of funding for the Angel Network, and we're still working on the final numbers, but we really wanted to have at least 25% be women of color that applied, and we surpassed that goal, which was great. But then I would say more importantly is also making sure that then that group gets through to to the later rounds. And right now we're still in final due diligence, but the 10 companies that we had in due diligence at the end, 40% were women of color, and we were proud of that. So we're going to continue to push that. We can always continue to grow, frankly. So that was something that we really saw our efforts sort of come to life and see some results. And then we're going to share what our final numbers are once we get everything together and get our final cycle, or our first cycle, I should say, finished.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would say, we've started to see some of those benefits as well. As I mentioned, over half of our users are Black or Brown, which we're really proud of. I talked about the 1,000 students that are student dropouts that are prevented each month. About 260 of those are student parents, mothers and fathers who are able to continue, moving the needle forward to better their lives for their families, which I think is really important. So we've definitely seen a lot of those benefits. I think what's really important to us now, kind of at this stage, is to make sure that we stay true to that mission, even as we take on, further investment, and as we try to, continue to expand to just new types of opportunities, whether it's outside of colleges to focus on, say, nonprofits, or to, work with larger universities, that we still have that singular focus in mind.
Excellent.
I'm going to answer my last question with this answer. It's paying off because we have a diverse team. That's how we got the 6 figures quickly.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It ran a little bit longer than I planned, but it's, for me, very much worth it. I'm sure for the viewers out there, we've got a nice big room full of people. Been a very valuable conversation. So thank you, Jess. Thank you, Melvin. Thank you, Clark, for joining us. It's been great.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, been great.
Yeah, honored.
Melvin, Clark, congratulations. And Brent, thanks so much for hosting.
Congrats to you as well. You all take care.
Yeah, congrats everybody.
You guys too. All right, well, without further ado, we're going to get to the moment that you've been waiting for, and we're going to find out who the Blazer winners are. And we'll do that by playing a video where you'll get to see some of the featured companies, and the Blazer winners in each category will be revealed. So we'll have that video coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, well, welcome back. Hope you had a chance to watch the whole video. I saw some really cool videos that companies put together there. We'll have that all online tomorrow for people to rewatch. Big congratulations to all the Blazer winners out there. I'm going to announce them real quickly in case you missed it in the video. In the software category, the Zebra. In CPG, Tecovas. In the COVID Innovators category, Armbrust American. For social impact, Notley Ventures. In cybersecurity, SpyCloud. Our Blazer winner in EdTech was Literati. In health tech, Everlywell. And for lifestyle, RV Share. And the real estate tech Blazer winner is Ojo Labs. And our community builders winner, Blazer winner, was Beam. And you heard from Jess a little bit earlier on this video. So that concludes our event. I want to thank everybody for being here with us. Again, congratulations to all the fire honorees. You can read about all 50 companies online, and especially congrats to the Blazer winners. We'll have a story up on Austin Inno tomorrow with a recap of this event and a recording of this conversation and the video. So please check back at austininno.com tomorrow, and we'll have a lot more. We'll also have more in the Beat newsletter. So thanks again very much for joining us. I wish we could go have a cocktail together after this, but it'll be all that much sweeter when we finally do. So thanks all. Take care.